In the heart of Manhattan, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and luxury cars lined the streets, lived a man who had everything money could buy. His name was Ethan Carter, and at just 38 years old, he had already carved his name into history as one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the world. He owned a tech empire that spanned continents, employed thousands, and made him richer than he ever imagined. But despite all the wealth, fame, and success, Ethan felt empty inside. Ethan's life was a whirlwind of meetings, business deals, and endless work. Every day blended into the next, filled with spreadsheets, presentations, and phone calls. His penthouse apartment on the top floor of a sleek glass building offered breathtaking views of the city below. But those lights didn't bring him joy anymore. They reminded him how far removed he was from the real world, the world where people laughed, cried, loved, and lived without worrying about stock prices or corporate takeovers. At night, when the noise of the city faded slightly, Ethan would sit by the window with a glass of whiskey in hand, staring out at the glittering skyline. He often wondered if this was it, if this was all there was to life. Sure, he had achieved more than most people dreamed of, but what did it mean? Who was he really living for? These questions haunted him, though he rarely voiced them aloud. To everyone else, Ethan was the picture of success, a confident, powerful man who seemed to have it all figured out. But deep down, he felt like an outsider looking in, disconnected from the very humanity he had once been part of. One evening, after another long day at the office, Ethan found himself reluctantly attending a charity gala. It wasn't something he usually did. He preferred staying away from such events unless absolutely necessary. But this particular gala was different. It was held in honor of underprivileged youth, a cause close to his late mother's heart. She had spent her life working tirelessly to help children in need, and Ethan felt obligated to show up, even if only briefly. The event was held in a grand ballroom decorated with sparkling chandeliers and elegant flower arrangements. Guests mingled in designer suits and gowns, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries. Ethan walked through the crowd feeling out of place, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of unfinished projects back at the office. He wasn't interested in networking or small talk. He just wanted to get through the evening and leave. But then, something caught his eye, or rather, someone. Across the room stood a woman unlike anyone else there. She wasn't dressed in haute couture or dripping with jewelry like the others. Instead, she wore a simple navy blue dress that hugged her frame modestly, paired with comfortable flats. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her face carried no trace of heavy makeup. Yet, there was an undeniable charm about her, something warm and inviting that drew Ethan in. Curious, Ethan moved closer, pretending to browse the silent auction tables nearby. As he eavesdropped on snippets of her conversation, he learned her name, Clara Bennett. She worked as a social worker, dedicating her life to helping struggling families and children. That night, she was representing the nonprofit organization she collaborated with closely, sharing stories of resilience and hope with anyone willing to listen. Clara spoke passionately, her voice steady yet full of emotion. "These kids aren't statistics," she said, addressing a small group gathered around her. "They're real people with dreams and potential. All they need is someone to believe in them." Her words resonated deeply with those listening, including Ethan, who found himself mesmerized by her conviction. Here was someone who genuinely cared, not because it looked good on paper or boosted their reputation, but because it was who they were. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a spark of curiosity. Who was this woman who seemed so unimpressed by the glitz and glamour surrounding her? What drove her to dedicate her life to serving others? And why did her presence make him feel alive? As the night wore on, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Clara. There was something magnetic about her, an authenticity he hadn't encountered in a long time. When the gala ended, he hesitated before leaving, unsure whether he should approach her. In the end, he decided against it, telling himself it was silly to chase after a stranger based on a fleeting impression. But as he stepped outside into the cool New York air, he knew one thing for certain. Clara had left an indelible mark on him, and he wouldn't be able to forget her anytime soon. The days following the charity gala felt unusually restless for Ethan. Try as he might, he couldn't shake the memory of the woman in the navy blue dress. Her words echoed in his mind. These kids aren't statistics. They're real people, with dreams and potential. Those simple yet powerful sentences lingered like a haunting melody, refusing to fade. Ethan wasn't used to feeling this way. He was a man who prided himself on control, on keeping his emotions in check and focusing only on what mattered most, his business. But Clara had disrupted that carefully constructed equilibrium. At first, Ethan tried to dismiss his thoughts about her as mere curiosity. After all, he met interesting people all the time at events like the gala, but this was different. There was something about Clara's authenticity that struck a chord deep within him. She didn't seem interested in impressing anyone or playing the game of superficial connections. Instead, she radiated a quiet confidence, a sense of purpose that made her stand out in a room full of pretense. Ethan found himself wondering if he could ever possess even a fraction of that clarity. Finally, unable to resist any longer, Ethan decided to reach out. Through mutual acquaintances, he discovered that Clara worked with a nonprofit organization focused on helping struggling families and children. Using his connections, he arranged a meeting under the guise of wanting to learn more about their initiatives. It wasn't entirely untrue. He did want to understand what drove someone like Clara, but there was no denying the ulterior motive behind his actions. He wanted to see her again. When the day of their meeting arrived, Ethan chose a small cafe near Clara's office instead of suggesting one of the high-end restaurants he typically frequented. Something told him that wouldn't sit right with her. The cafe was cozy, with mismatched chairs, warm lighting, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. As Ethan waited, nervously tapping his fingers against the table, he realized how out of place he looked in his tailored suit among the casually dressed patrons. For a moment, he questioned whether he'd made a mistake coming here. What could someone like him possibly have in common with someone like Clara? But then she walked in, and all his doubts melted away. Clara wore the same easy smile he remembered from the gala, though today she carried a tote bag stuffed with papers and folders. She greeted him warmly, shaking his hand firmly before sitting down. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come," she admitted, her tone light but genuine. Most people don't follow up after these kinds of introductions. Ethan chuckled awkwardly, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. "Well, I'm not most people," he replied, trying to sound confident. "And honestly, I've been curious about the work you do. You mentioned some inspiring stories at the gala, and I wanted to hear more." Clara raised an eyebrow, studying him for a moment before nodding. "All right, then. Let's talk." Over the next hour, she shared story after story about the family she worked with, the single mother juggling 3 jobs to put food on the table, the teenager determined to graduate despite living in a shelter, the young boy who dreamed of becoming an astronaut even though he'd never seen the stars outside his cramped apartment window. Each tale painted a vivid picture of resilience and hope, leaving Ethan both moved and humbled. For the first time in years, Ethan listened not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He asked questions, genuinely interested in understanding the challenges these families faced and how Clara managed to make such a difference. In return, Clara opened up about her own journey, revealing that she had grown up in similar circumstances. Her passion stemmed not just from empathy but from personal experience. Hearing her speak, Ethan felt a strange mix of admiration and envy. Admiration for her unwavering dedication and envy for the sense of purpose she clearly possessed. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, stretching far beyond the allotted time. By the end of it, Ethan found himself reluctant to leave. Before parting ways, he impulsively said, "We should do this again sometime." Clara smiled, though there was a hint of skepticism in her eyes. "Sure, why not? Just don't make promises you can't keep." Over the following weeks, Ethan kept his word. He began volunteering at Clara's nonprofit, rolling up his sleeves and diving into tasks he'd never imagined himself doing. From sorting donations to mentoring teenagers, he threw himself into the work with surprising enthusiasm. At first, the other volunteers were wary of him, unsure what to make of the billionaire showing up in their midst. But Ethan didn't care about their initial judgment. He was too focused on proving to himself and maybe to Clara that he was serious about making a difference. Through these experiences, Ethan started seeing the world in a new light. He witnessed firsthand the struggles of those living paycheck to paycheck, grappling with issues he had only read about in reports. He saw the exhaustion in parents' eyes as they fought to provide for their children, the frustration in teenagers who felt trapped by circumstances beyond their control. And yet, amidst all the hardship, he also saw glimpses of joy, resilience, and community spirit qualities that money alone could never buy. Clara noticed the change in him, too. Gone was the guarded, aloof businessman she had met at the gala. In his place stood someone willing to listen, to learn, and to grow. Still, she remained cautious. Ethan's privileged background was a constant reminder of the gap between them. Could someone who had spent his entire life insulated by wealth truly understand the realities she dealt with every day? Or was this just another phase of fleeting interest that would fade once the novelty wore off? Her doubts came to a head during one particularly challenging afternoon. Ethan had suggested funding a large-scale project aimed at addressing homelessness, proposing to write a sizable check to get things moving quickly. While his intentions were good, Clara couldn't help but feel frustrated. "It's not about throwing money at the problem," she snapped, her voice tinged with irritation. "You can't solve decades of systemic issues overnight with a blank check. Real change takes time, effort, and commitment." Ethan flinched, taken aback by her sharpness. But instead of retreating, he took a deep breath and nodded. "You're right," he admitted softly. "I don't fully understand yet, but I want to. Will you teach me?" That moment marked a turning point in their relationship. Clara realized that Ethan wasn't just paying lip service to the cause. He genuinely wanted to learn and grow. And Ethan, for his part, recognized that he still had much to discover, not just about the world around him, but about himself. Together, they navigated the complexities of their partnership, finding strength in their differences and learning to trust each other. As the weeks turned into months, their bond deepened. They weren't just colleagues or acquaintances anymore. They were friends, confidants, and partners in a shared mission. For Ethan, Clara became a guiding light, showing him the beauty of service and empathy. And for Clara, Ethan became a reminder that even the hardest hearts could open when given the chance. Their connection grew stronger with each passing day, laying the foundation for something neither of them had anticipated: love. Ethan's transformation didn't happen overnight. It was slow, almost imperceptible at first, a shift in the way he carried himself, the choices he made, and the priorities he set. At the beginning of his journey with Clara, Ethan had been unsure of where he fit into her world. He'd walked into it carrying the weight of privilege, aware that his wealth and status set him apart from the people she served every day. But as time went on, something remarkable began to unfold. Ethan started changing, not because he felt obligated to, but because he wanted to. One of the first big changes came when Ethan decided to sell off one of his luxury properties, a sprawling beachfront mansion he rarely visited. The idea struck him during a conversation with Clara about funding shortages at her nonprofit. "We could do so much more if we had the resources," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "But grants are competitive, and donations don't always cover everything we need." That night, Ethan lay awake, thinking about her words. He glanced at the stack of property documents sitting on his desk, assets he barely used but kept, because they were symbols of success. What good were those symbols if they sat idle while others struggled? The next morning, he called his real estate agent and instructed them to put the mansion on the market. When the sale closed weeks later, Ethan donated the entire proceeds to Clara's organization. Clara was stunned when she found out. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is incredible." Ethan shrugged, trying to downplay the gesture. "I don't need another house collecting dust," he replied. "Besides, you've shown me what really matters. This feels like the right thing to do." It wasn't just about money, though. Ethan also began scaling back his commitments at work, delegating responsibilities to trusted colleagues so he could dedicate more time to volunteering. For years, his identity had been tied to his career, to being the man who built empires and shattered records. Letting go of that control wasn't easy, but it allowed him to focus on something greater than profit margins or boardroom victories. He started spending his days mentoring teenagers at the nonprofit, helping them write resumes, practice interview skills, and plan for their futures. Some of the kids were skeptical of him at first, assuming he was just another rich guy trying to feel good about himself. But over time, they warmed up to him, realizing that Ethan genuinely cared about their success. For Clara, watching Ethan evolve was both inspiring and terrifying. She admired his willingness to step out of his comfort zone, but part of her worried about getting too close to someone whose life seemed so far removed from hers. Their worlds collided in ways that were beautiful yet complicated. Once, after a particularly grueling day at work, Clara snapped at Ethan when he suggested throwing money at a problem instead of addressing its root cause. Her anger caught him off guard, but instead of retreating, Ethan listened. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I still have a lot to learn. Will you help me?" That moment marked a turning point in their relationship. Clara realized that Ethan wasn't just paying lip service to the cause. He genuinely wanted to grow and understand. And Ethan, for his part, recognized that he still had much to discover, not just about the world around him, but about himself. Together, they navigated the complexities of their partnership, finding strength in their differences and learning to trust each other. As their bond deepened, Ethan began opening up to Clara in ways he never had with anyone else. Late one evening, as they sat together in her tiny apartment sipping tea, Ethan confessed something he'd kept buried for years. "I've spent my whole life chasing success," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "But the truth is, I've been lonely for as long about I can remember. My parents died when I was young, and I threw myself into work because it was easier than dealing with the pain. I thought achieving more would fill the void, but it never did." Clara reached across the table and placed a hand on his. "You're not alone anymore," she said softly. "You have people who care about you now, including me." Those words hit Ethan like a tidal wave. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, to let someone see the cracks in his armor. In return, Clara shared pieces of her own story, the struggles she faced growing up, the sacrifices she made to pursue her passion for helping others, and the fears she harbored about whether she was making enough of a difference. They talked late into the night, their voices mingling with the hum of the city outside. Over time, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. It wasn't love at first sight or some grand romantic gesture. It was quieter, steadier and built on mutual respect and admiration. Ethan loved how grounded Clara was, how she saw the best in people even when they couldn't see it themselves. And Clara loved how hard Ethan worked to become a better version of himself, how he embraced challenges instead of shying away from them. Still, their relationship wasn't without its hurdles. There were moments of tension, times when their vastly different backgrounds threatened to pull them apart. Once, during a heated argument, Clara accused Ethan of treating problems like transactions, fixing things with solutions instead of truly understanding them. Ethan bristled at first, defensive and hurt. But later that night, after cooling off, he approached her with an apology. "You're right," he said. "I'm still learning, and I'll probably mess up again. But I want to get better for you, for the people we're helping, and for myself." Clara softened, touched by his sincerity. "I know you're trying," she said, "and that means everything to me." Through these ups and downs, their connection grew stronger. They weren't just friends or colleagues anymore. They were partners, united by a shared vision of creating positive change. Ethan showed Clara the power of dreaming big, of believing that anything was possible with determination and effort. And Clara reminded Ethan of the beauty of service, of finding joy in giving back and lifting others up. By the time winter rolled around, neither of them could deny what they felt for each other. One chilly December evening, as snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, Ethan invited Clara to join him for a walk through Central Park. Bundled in scarves and coats, they strolled along winding paths lit by twinkling streetlights. The air was crisp, and the city seemed quieter than usual, as if holding its breath. When they reached Bow Bridge, Ethan stopped and turned to face Clara. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, and his breath formed little clouds in the cold air. "There's something I need to say," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I never thought I'd find someone who makes me want to be better, to be more than just a businessman or a billionaire. You've given me a purpose I didn't know I was missing." Clara's heart raced as she looked at him, her cheeks flushed from both the cold and the intensity of the moment. "You've changed my life too," she replied softly. "You've taught me that even the hardest hearts can open if given the chance." Standing there under the glow of the lampposts, surrounded by the quiet magic of the park, they embraced. Perfect blend of two worlds coming together. What had started as a tentative friendship had evolved into something profound, a partnership rooted in love, trust, and a shared commitment to making the world a better place. As the seasons changed and winter gave way to spring, Ethan and Clara's relationship continued to grow in ways neither of them had anticipated. Their connection wasn't just about shared goals or mutual admiration anymore. It had evolved into something deeper, richer, and more profound. Love had taken root between them, quietly but surely, like a seed planted in fertile soil that blossomed into something beautiful. One crisp April morning, Ethan decided to surprise Clara with a picnic in Central Park. He knew how much she loved the outdoors, especially during this time of year when the trees were beginning to bud and flowers peeked through the ground after months of dormancy. Ethan had always been someone who preferred structure and control, but lately he'd discovered joy and spontaneity, something Clara had taught him. This picnic was his way of showing her how much she meant to him. He woke up early, packing a basket with simple yet thoughtful items. Fresh bagels from her favorite bakery, a thermos of hot coffee, strawberries dipped in chocolate, and a blanket borrowed from his penthouse, which he promised himself he would return later. When he arrived at her apartment, she greeted him with a mix of surprise and amusement. "What is all this?" she asked, eyeing the basket skeptically. "It's a surprise," Ethan said with a grin, holding out his hand. "Come on. Trust me." Clara hesitated for only a moment before slipping her hand into his. As they walked through the park together, the sun casting golden light over everything it touched, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment wash over her. Life hadn't always been kind to either of them, but somehow, against all odds, they had found each other. And now, here they were, two people from completely different worlds, walking side by side under the same sky. They found a quiet spot near the lake, where ducks paddled lazily across the water and children laughed as they chased each other around. Ethan spread out the blanket, gesturing for Clara to sit down. For a while they simply enjoyed the peacefulness of the moment, sipping coffee and nibbling on bagels as the city buzzed faintly in the distance. But Ethan knew there was something else he needed to say, something he'd been carrying in his heart for weeks. Taking a deep breath, he turned to face her. "Clara," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "I need to tell you something important." Clara looked at him, sensing the gravity in his tone. "Okay," she said softly, giving him her full attention. Ethan paused, searching for the right words. How could he possibly express everything she meant to him? Finally, he spoke from the heart. "When I met you, I didn't know what I was missing. You've shown me things I never thought possible, how to care deeply, how to give without expecting anything in return, and how to find meaning beyond money or success. Before you, my life felt empty, no matter how much I achieved. But now I feel alive in a way I never have before." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes as she listened, her heart swelling with emotion. She had always believed in the goodness within Ethan, even when others doubted him. To hear him speak these words, to see how far he had come, was overwhelming. "I never imagined I'd meet someone like you," Ethan continued, his voice trembling slightly. "Someone who makes me want to be better every single day. Clara, I'm in love with you, completely and utterly. And I don't ever want to lose what we have." For a moment, Clara couldn't speak. The weight of his confession hung in the air, mingling with the sounds of nature around them. Then, slowly, she reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "Ethan," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "you've changed my life too. You've taught me that even the hardest hearts can open if given the chance. And yes, I love you too." The relief that washed over Ethan's face was palpable. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as if afraid she might disappear. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of spring and the promise of new beginnings, they both knew they had found something rare and precious, a love that transcended differences, challenged them to grow, and brought them closer to who they were truly meant to be. Over the next few months, Ethan and Clara leaned even further into their partnership, not just as a couple, but as teammates working toward a common goal. They spent countless hours brainstorming ideas for projects that could make a real impact. One of their biggest initiatives involved creating a mentorship program that paired struggling teens with successful professionals, willing to share their knowledge and experiences. Ethan used his connections to recruit mentors from various industries, while Clara ensured the program stayed grounded in the needs of the community. Their collaboration extended beyond work, too. On weekends, they explored the city together, discovering hidden gems they'd never noticed before: a tiny bookstore tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, a jazz club where live music filled the air with soulful melodies, and a rooftop garden where they could escape the chaos below. Each experience brought them closer, deepening their bond and reminding them of the magic of simply being present with one another. Of course, challenges still arose. There were days when Ethan struggled to balance his responsibilities at the nonprofit with the demands of his business empire. And there were moments when Clara questioned whether she was doing enough, whether she was truly making a difference in the lives of those she served. But through it all, they leaned on each other, offering support and encouragement whenever the other faltered. One evening, as they sat on Clara's couch watching an old movie, Ethan turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about what our lives would be like if we hadn't met?" he asked. Clara tilted her head, considering the question. Sometimes, she admitted, but then I realize how lucky we are. We've been given this incredible opportunity to change not just our own lives, but the lives of others too. Together, we're stronger than we could ever be apart. Ethan smiled, pulling her closer. You're right, he said. And I wouldn't trade this for anything. By summer, their efforts began bearing fruit. The mentorship program, launched successfully, pairing dozens of teens with mentors who helped guide them toward brighter futures. Families benefiting from the nonprofit services reported feeling more hopeful and supported than ever before. And Ethan and Clara found themselves celebrated not just as individuals, but as a team, a power couple whose combined strengths inspired everyone around them. Through it all, their love remained the foundation of everything they did. It wasn't perfect, no relationship ever is, but it was real, raw, and deeply fulfilling. They reminded each other daily that true happiness came not from achieving perfection, but from embracing imperfection and growing together. As fireworks lit up the night sky on the 4th of July, Ethan and Clara stood hand in hand, gazing upward. The explosions of color reflected off their faces, mirroring the brilliance of the journey they were on. In each other, they had found not just a partner, but a soulmate, a person who understood them completely and loved them unconditionally. And as they kissed beneath the stars, they knew their story was just beginning. Years had passed since that crisp April morning in Central Park when Ethan and Clara confessed their love for each other. Their journey together had been anything but ordinary, a roller coaster of challenges, growth, and triumphs. But through it all, they remained steadfast, supporting one another as they worked to create a better world. Now, standing side by side on a sunny September afternoon, they were ready to unveil the culmination of their shared vision, a state-of-the-art community center designed to uplift underserved families. The grand opening ceremony was held in the heart of the city, where the newly constructed facility stood tall, a beacon of hope amidst the bustling streets. Its glass walls reflected the sunlight, symbolizing transparency and openness, while colorful murals painted by local artists adorned its exterior. Inside, classrooms buzzed with excitement, stocked with books, computers, and art supplies. There was a health clinic offering free checkups, a job training center equipped with modern tools, and even a small theater for performances and workshops. It was more than just a building. It was a hub of opportunity, creativity, and connection. Ethan adjusted his tie nervously as he glanced at the crowd gathered outside. Hundreds of people had come to celebrate families who would benefit from the center's programs, volunteers who had poured their hearts into making it happen, and friends who had supported Ethan and Clara every step of the way. Standing beside him, Clara looked radiant in a simple yet elegant dress, her eyes shining with pride and joy. She gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, sensing his nerves. "You've got this," she whispered with a smile. "Just speak from the heart." Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped up to the podium, the microphone amplifying his voice across the plaza. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his tone warm but steady. "This moment means so much, not just to me, but to everyone who played a part in bringing this dream to life." He paused, scanning the sea of faces before him. Some were smiling, others wiping away tears, and many nodding in agreement as he continued. "When I first met Clara, I didn't know what I was missing. She showed me that success isn't measured by wealth or power, it's measured by the lives we touch and the impact we leave behind. This community center is proof of that belief. It's not just a project funded by my foundation. It's a testament to what happens when two people come together with a shared purpose." Ethan turned to Clara, his voice softening. "Clara, none of this would have been possible without you. You've taught me the value of service, compassion, and resilience. More importantly, you've reminded me what it means to truly live. Thank you for believing in me, even when I doubted myself." The crowd erupted into applause, cheering not just for Ethan's words, but for the authenticity behind them. Clara stepped forward next, her cheeks flushed with emotion. "I never imagined I'd stand here today, watching something so incredible come to life," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This center represents everything we fought for to give people a chance to dream bigger, to heal, and to grow. It's not about us. It's about the families and children who will walk through these doors and find hope where there may have been none before." As she spoke, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. From strangers meeting at a charity gala to soulmates united by love and purpose, their bond had transformed not only their own lives but the lives of countless others. Together, they had built something lasting, a legacy rooted in kindness, empathy, and action. After the speeches, the ribbon-cutting ceremony brought an eruption of cheers. Children ran inside, eager to explore the new space, while parents exchanged hugs and tears of gratitude. Volunteers handed out balloons and snacks, creating an atmosphere of celebration and unity. Ethan and Clara wandered through the halls, taking it all in: the laughter, the chatter, the energy of possibility filling every corner. In one classroom, a group of teenagers huddled around a computer, learning coding skills from a volunteer mentor. In another, toddlers giggled as they finger-painted colorful masterpieces. Downstairs, a mother cradled her baby during a wellness checkup, her face glowing with relief. Every scene painted a vivid picture of progress and potential, reminding Ethan and Clara why they had started this journey in the first place. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan and Clara found themselves alone on the rooftop terrace of the community center. The city lights twinkled in the distance, casting a soft glow over the skyline. They stood in silence for a moment, simply soaking in the magnitude of what they had accomplished. "You know," Ethan said finally, breaking the quiet, "when I used to look out at this view from my penthouse, I always felt empty, like I was watching life happen without really living it. But now I feel alive, and it's because of you." Clara smiled, leaning into him as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "It's because of us," she corrected gently. "We did this together. Neither of us could have done it alone." Ethan nodded, pulling her closer. "You're right. And I wouldn't trade this for anything. Not the money, not the fame, not any of it. What we have here, what we've built, it's real. It matters." They stayed like that for a long time, gazing out at the city they loved, knowing they had made a difference. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would still be obstacles to overcome and battles to fight. But they faced those challenges with confidence, knowing they had each other and the unwavering support of the community they had helped build. As the stars emerged one by one in the night sky, Ethan kissed Clara's forehead, whispering, "Here's to us, to the life we've created and the lives we've touched, to love, purpose, and the future." Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "To us," she echoed softly. And in that moment, surrounded by the hum of the city and the promise of tomorrow, they knew they had found something rare and extraordinary. Their story wasn't just about falling in love or building a community. It was about finding meaning, connection, and fulfillment in a world that often felt chaotic and divided. Together they proved that even the most unexpected encounters could lead to the greatest joys, and that true happiness came not from what you achieved alone, but from what you built together.